Hey there everyone, Matt Forney here, mattforney.com. Apologize for the unusual environs. I'm actually in a rest stop somewhere east of Des Moines. I had to hit the road immediately after caucus night because there's a huge snowstorm about ready to roll through Iowa and Missouri. And I'm trying to get to Chicago as fast as I can before I get enveloped in it, so I have to make do with what I can get. But here we've found a really good use for the free Wi-Fi that all the Iowa rest stops have. But anyway, my Iowa campaign coverage has concluded. Caucus night was last night, and I have some commentary on what I've seen and what I've done. The obvious big story is that Donald Trump did not win the Iowa caucus. He was upset by Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, as of this recording, got I think 28% of the vote, 29%. Trump only got 25%. I freely admit that I was wrong with my prediction. I predicted that Donald Trump would not only win Iowa, he'd get it by a convincing margin. I put in my prediction is that the one thing that might stump Trump is the fact that a lot of his voters supporters are first-time voters, and the Iowa's caucus structure favors long-time party loyalists, and I imagine Cruz is getting his support from those people. So that may be where the Trump was tripped up. So I admit I was wrong on that. However, I was right on my other predictions. I predicted that Rubio would be number 3, Ben Carson would be number 4, Rand Paul would be 5, and Jeb Bush would be 6. However, I want to talk about the fact that Rubio experienced some kind of surge. He actually came in a very close third. He got 23% of the vote, just behind Trump. I think the margin was only by about a few thousand votes. And I want to discuss the fact that it is highly likely that this is the result of voter fraud. And again, this sounds like the conservatives are going to try and dismiss this as sour grapes over Trump losing. I acknowledge the fact that Cruz won due to the fact that he had a better ground game and the fact that I was wrong on Trump. But Rubio does not make any sense. Because I'm here on the ground in Iowa. I've been here for over nearly 2 weeks now, covering the campaigns. I've been to campaign events from every major candidate from both parties, with the exception of John Kasich, as well as 3 of the idiots in the undercard debate. In fact, I actually went to a Chris Christie event the morning of the caucus, so I covered everything. I saw the candidates at least once, and a few of them I saw multiple times. Trump always consistently drew the largest crowds to his rallies, by far. Ted Cruz, on the Republican side, Ted Cruz is the second largest, but it's a long way down. Rubio drew almost no one to his events. In fact, I have a good cross comparison because I went to a Trump event and a Rubio event on the same day. I went to a Trump event in Pella, Iowa on the 23rd of January, and then I later went to a Rubio town hall nearby Indianola on the same day. The Trump event attracted 3,000 people. Now consider that Pella is a town of about 10,000. That's a pretty remarkable number. In fact, there were so many people there that about 2/3 of the people who came to see Trump had to be shunted into an overflow auditorium. I was luckily got in on the initial Trump rally, so I was able to film that. In fact, I have it on my channel. Whereas the Rubio events drew almost nobody. I'd be surprised if there were at least 200. If there were at least 200 people there, I'd peg the number who went to go see Rubio at 150. And not only that, Rubio's supporters were far less passionate than Trump's. Like I said, his political rallies have like a rock star atmosphere, whereas the Rubio one attracted mostly old people who were just sort of there going for the motions. And lest you think that rallies are the end, have no correlation to voting at all, the polls backed me up. Every poll from now until for the past month showed Rubio being in a distant third with 10% of the vote, 12% of the vote, maybe 15% of the vote. He never broke out of that ghetto. There were no polls prior to the caucus indicating that he was rising in support, and not one of the pundits can come up with a convincing reason as to why he would rise in support. This surge came completely out of nowhere. There's no explanation for it. There's no explanation. There's no predictor. It was not anticipated in the polls, and it's not backed up by what I've actually seen. I have a video of the Trump rally. I have video of the Rubio town hall. I really suspect foul play here, and I'm not just saying this, half-cocked. Breitbart actually reported on Sunday that Microsoft was providing technology for tallying the votes in the Iowa caucus. And as it turns out, Microsoft is Marco Rubio's second largest donor. You can look this up again. It's Breitbart. I think the writer is Julie Hahn. The Bernie Sanders campaign actually pointed this out and pointed out that it was a massive conflict of interest to have someone who's donated to a political candidate, providing the technology by which the votes for a election in which that candidate is standing for are being counted. And again, there's no hard evidence of this so far. 8chan was also discussing that there's a possible GOP plan to, cook the books for Rubio. My personal theory on this one is that Rubio was being groomed as the successor to Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush was originally the guy that the GOP establishment was going to run as their candidate. In fact, they had actually, if you go to the Last Refuge, they've been doing a series of posts called Tripwire Alerts. They discussed how the GOP structured this presidential nomination to elect Jeb Bush. And the reason it hasn't gone according to plan is because Donald Trump came in and completely blew it wide open. Right now, Jeb Bush's polling numbers, I think he only got like 3% or some anemic percentage in the caucus. He was doing poorly in the polls. He's going to do poorly in New Hampshire. I think a number of the GOP establishment are deciding that he's going to go nowhere, and they're going to try and group Rubio as a successor. Now, what they're trying to do is build up fake momentum for success in Rubio in future races. They didn't put him at number 2 or number 1 because a sudden surge of Rubio from a distant third at 10% up to winning with 30% or so would have set off people's BS alarms. So they put him in a close third behind Donald Trump for plausible deniability. They goosed the vote enough so that it looks like it could plausibly happen to anyone who hasn't seen what was going on the ground here in Iowa. What they're going to do is this fake win is going to create fake momentum for Rubio. He's going to be touted by the media as the next rising star of the GOP, probable winner of the nomination, and they're going to try to use this to ride this to a first place victory or maybe a close second place victory in New Hampshire, where Trump has been dominating the polls since I think at least August or September. And if they don't get New Hampshire, they're going to do South Carolina. The idea is to basically lure away Trump's supporters, the ones who are with him because he's a winner, or try to convince people that Rubio's coronation will be inevitable, so you might as well vote for him anyway, which is basically the tactic that was done with Romney in 2012, only on a lesser scale. Trump needs to investigate this, he needs to call it out, and he needs to be careful. Now, Iowa is, like a lot of people have been trying to point out that Iowa hasn't really been a good predictor of presidential success. The winner of the Iowa caucus, the Republican caucus anyway, hasn't gone on to win the presidential nomination or even the race in quite some time. But at the same time, if the GOP establishment and Microsoft are willing to commit voter fraud to boost Rubio, Trump needs to be aware of this. We need to be aware of it as the voters, as Trump supporters. We need to know what's going on. We need to fight it every way we can. We cannot let them win. The GOP establishment, the conservatives, are not going to let their power slip away so easily. We need to call this out. We need to keep the revolution alive, as it were. Trump is calling on us to help make America great again, and we have to hold to that. Now, on the Democratic side, actually on caucus night, I decided to go attend Hillary Clinton's victory party for several reasons. I wanted to, bathe in leftist tears. My assumption was that Bernie Sanders would pull off a narrow upset win, and I was looking to see the delight when Hillary Clinton got on stage and saw that the presidential nomination she worked so hard for was being taken away from her again. Now, I didn't quite get this schadenfreude that I was hoping for because the two of them, as I said, as of this recording, are in a statistical dead heat. It's like, I think it's like Clinton is at like at 50.1%, Sanders is at like, 49.4%. Too close to call, they're going to have to do multiple recounts, etc. I was there with Carl Lushanka of Glorious Hat. He had to ditch early. He's going to visit a friend in another state. He also had to flee the storm. But I got a video of Hillary Clinton's, I guess you could call it a victory speech. The crowd was pretty going wild. They were fired up. Now, what I have to say about the Sanders thing is I was wrong on this as well. But I was not as confident in my assumption here as I was about my my guess about Trump, because Sanders is really running up against the same problem Trump is. A lot of his supporters are first-time voters. They're not acquainted with the caucus structure. The Democratic caucus structure is way more complex than the Republican one. So that may have to do with the fact that he did not perform as well as I thought he would. But at the same time, there's a saying I heard years ago that really applies to the situation. The lightweight and the heavyweight get into a match and they draw. The lightweight won because Hillary Clinton is the heavyweight. The vote was not supposed to be this close. The entire structure of the Democratic nomination was designed to coordinate Hillary. That's why few candidates entered the race. That's why there were only a handful of debates sanctioned by the DNC chairwoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. That's why, because the party wanted Hillary as their nominee. Sanders was an unwelcome intrusion, and the only reason they've tolerated him so far is because his grassroots supporters would wreak havoc otherwise. Now, Sanders, even though Sanders did not get the upset win, though who knows with the recounts he might actually pull it off, he and his campaign really should be proud of what they've accomplished. The fact that with the media on her side, the party machinery on her side, everyone having the status of the presumptive frontrunner, she can still only tie Sanders in the polls. A man who started out with a grassroots campaign, doesn't have big money behind him, is only accepting individual contributions. He and Trump are the only candidates in the race who are refusing to take money from special interests. Sanders and his supporters, should feel proud of that. This is momentum that is going to carry. Sanders is already leading in the polls in New Hampshire because New Hampshire borders Vermont, which is his home state. That momentum is he's going to score a big victory in New Hampshire. I'm confident of that, based both on his existing performance there as well as his performance in Iowa. And he's going to have a fighting chance of getting the nomination now. But anyway, that'll conclude my Iowa coverage. I should sign off now soon. But anyway, I want to thank everyone who tuned in. My last dispatch for Return of Kings will be published this morning. And by the time you see this video, I'll already be in Chicago. Anyway, I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in to watch my videos and read my articles, everyone who followed me on Twitter and boosted my articles. I'd like to thank Roosh at Return of Kings and Daniel Freeberg at Right On for publishing my dispatches on the caucuses. I'd like to thank my editor, Winston Smith at Return of Kings, as well as my editors, John Morgan, Tor Westman, and Ann Sturzinger at Right On for making my dispatches readable. I'd like to thank you, the readers, obviously, for following along. I'd like to thank the donors most of all, because I would not. You made it financially possible for me to do this. You've got these news crews, mainstream media, blowing thousands of dollars on these projects. I was able to cover the Iowa caucuses independently without corporate interference for nothing, for $1,000. Okay, I produced all this content. I got the real story. And I thank all of you for supporting me this. I'm going to hit the road now, and I'm going to be taking a break for the next few days just because I am absolutely burned out. I've got a podcast coming down next tomorrow. I did with Carl Ushanka, but I'm going to take a break for a few days. I'm absolutely burned out. But thanks for watching, and I stick with me for future projects. Don't join on Carver Run Them, don't the bastards grind you down. Thanks for watching. I'm Matt Forney, and I'm out.